Join us on the Path Radio Mix online. And to get there, type in thepathradio.com. That's thepathradio.com. And enjoy free streaming music all day long. That's it. thepathradio.com. All right, now let's get to the main show, the Monthly Social Podcast, with me, your host, Guido Perino, as you go on with Guido. Hello and welcome to the March 2022 Go On With Guido podcast show. We got a lineup that includes today the Ottawa Occupation Law, Liberties, and Toilet Paper. We're going to have a quick look at the Ontario program that's going to give back some money from the license plates. The Co-Conspirators join us as our main guests, introducing their new album, talking music, and helping us introduce Black History Month through the lonesome death of Elijah McClain. We're also going to take a look at pet trends for 2022 and what we know about that. And the four fans are going to talk sports as they transition into a spin-off podcast called It's Not the Ref. Now, let's go! But first, a quick word from one of our friends of the podcast, Johnny Prosciutto. Johnny Prosciutto, artisanal Italian homemade products. We make it like our grandfather, or as we say, Nonno. Naturally cured, old-fashioned, and delicious. The best part? We deliver straight to your front door. We offer free shipping when spending over $99. Order online at johnnyprosciutto.com and stay safe. And when you use the code GOGUIDO, you're going to save $10 off your entire order. That's the code GOGUIDO on johnnyprosciutto.com. It is indeed the March show. And there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. So we're going to do things a little bit different this show. Now, typically I introduce one of our main guests and we get into that. And I promise you, we're going to get into that. And there's a whole bunch of content that you're going to enjoy with that. But before we do that, there's just so much going on that I thought I wanted to address it. I mean, we've got the Olympics are over, and we don't know what the results of those are in terms of, you know, how many Canadians were really interested or how many watched, and maybe even right across the world, given that they were held in China and some of the things that kind of have been going on in China, whether people supported that. We've got the situation in Ukraine where Russia has, for lack of better words, invaded portions of Ukraine back on February 22nd. And we don't know what's coming of that as different sanctions were thrown at Russia and some of the posturing and maneuvering that's going on there. Hopefully that's not, turning out to be another world war. Certainly would be a different situation if that unfolds. And then, of course, we've got what's going on closer to home. We've got the whole Ottawa occupation in the name of freedom. I don't know. I mean, come on. I've hummed and hawed about, the words that folks are using and how they're using the word freedom. So I'm going to read you something, and then I'm going to come back and add some commentary. What I'm going to read you is an article that I wrote on February 11th, and it's called Law, Liberty, Freedom, and Toilet Paper. Our friend Toilet Paper is back. Anyways, have a listen. Toilet paper is a product that you have the choice to purchase. If you do purchase it, you then have the choice to use it or not. Arguably, there may be a product other than toilet paper that can serve a similar function, albeit with varying results. Your choice of purchasing or using toilet paper or an alternate product solely impacts your own well-being, whether it is health, hygiene, or otherwise, providing the outcomes of your choice remains within the boundaries of your personal domain of freedom. Once you engage in a larger community, your choices then become part of a larger domain of freedom, a domain where freedom is protected by the balance of laws and liberty for the greater good of the larger community in which you live. The use of a product like toilet paper, along with washing your hands with soap and water, provide multiple layers of protection for yourself and others around you from a long list of diseases like C. diff, cholera, E. coli, and others. We know this because the science community has identified and provided information for our education, along with mitigation strategies to avoid becoming ill or imparting illness on others. Nobody knows if you use toilet paper or wash your hands, but the expectation is that because you have enough knowledge and social courtesy for your family and community, that you will. Repurposing freedom to make their personal domain greater than the community has become the foundation from a melting pot of individuals in Ottawa with varying intent, protesting a litany of griefs under a confused banner of laws and liberty. Whatever the grief of choice might be, whether a vaccine, the use of masks, washing of hands, or use of toilet paper, a necessary tool in influencing change is the ability to communicate. A protest might also gain credibility when the goal is clear, aligns to laws and liberty, and does so in a manner where the opportunity equals the challenge. If the scope of the protest devolves, then so too does its credibility. The misguided Ottawa protest has been watered down by multiple fringe groups. Of course, many of the participants will hang their pride on the fact that it has halted life in the capital of Canada, and that achievement requires more than a fringe minority. The idea that a smaller group of people is incapable of creating sustained disruption is the equivalent of saying that you need 2-ply toilet paper to do the job. Of course, 2-ply would be better, but 1-ply can work in different configurations and still generate successful or failed results. Their concern over the number of present individuals is an unnecessary obsession of validation by numbers than a more effective one of cause and impact that also seems to be borrowed from international political influencers. Either way, this has become an insurrection on democracy and government more than a protest on vaccine mandates or masks, where many of the participants, in the absence of reasonability, have reduced their communication to 2 words. Honk, honk, the equivalent of a child amidst a tantrum. There is still much confusion among this desolate group, potentially supported by other fringe disruptors, local and abroad, while masking their desire for upheaval under the guise of freedom as they expand efforts in other locations across Ontario. Often, their use of language and material to support their version of freedom is drawn from American content, which has no bearing on Canadian law. John Locke is an English philosopher credited with the idea that where there is no law, there is no freedom, which was arguably and in different forms later borrowed by American Thomas Jefferson, who coined life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Even if Canadian protesters want to lean on that ideology, the inclusion of liberty can only be achieved with the balance of law. You see, without any law at all, the protesters wouldn't have the freedom they already have. The reality is that most mandates will come to a natural end in the not-so-distant future, and it will have less to do with these protests and more to do with the fact that over 80% of Canadians are vaccinated and have been following public safety and courtesy measures. They have been doing this both in their private domain as well as public, and they've been doing it in the best interest of their family, friends, and some people they haven't even met. They achieve this without making their own laws, losing their liberty and freedoms, and maintaining their choice of toilet paper practice. Of course, this is an opinion article by me, Guido Perino, of the Go On with Guido podcast. Now, there's some other interesting things that have been going on, and that is the protesters, if we want to call them protesters, because I'm not, as I said in the article, I'm not certain that they are protesters as much as they're attacking democracy, trying to overthrow the government, which is really not how I believe this movement initially started. But there's a couple of things going on in that the distribution of information false information by many of the people involved in this, we'll say protest for now. And we know that information really falls into one of two categories. It falls into misinformation or disinformation. And there is a difference between these two terms. Back in September of 2021, I wrote an article on that about misinformation and disinformation and how you can use the two and not use the two based on your opinion. And it's important. I'm just going to revisit the definition of that because it's important to understand what happens between misinformation and disinformation. So I'm going to read you two different paragraphs. Opinions can also be foundations for misinformation, where perhaps false information, and this is key, is unknowingly distributed. This happens quite often on social media as data is consumed in short time spans with time pressure anxiety to share and like, as often headlines are the precipice for distribution without validating the contents that accompany it. What results is the distribution of information that is false. While the person perhaps shared the misinformation without intent, they may have also been careless and lazy, contributing to greater societal divide or other harmful consequences unbeknownst to them. So misinformation is you're sharing the information and maybe you don't quite know that it's false information. You didn't do the homework. You didn't check it out. You just thought, hey, there it is. This sounds credible. I'm going to share it. You might have shared misinformation. Now, unfortunately, this can go one step further. There is also an abundance of disinformation on social media. Disinformation is when a person knows that the information they are sharing isn't factual at all, but still decides to share, post, and promote it. Perhaps because it supports their opinion, perhaps because it garners them support with like-minded individuals, or perhaps with pure malicious intent. Now, if you want to read the entire article, you can go on the guidoprano.com website, look up the article. It's dated September 26, 2021. And this has stayed relevant for months and months and months, not just as it applied to COVID-19 and things that were being distributed from the pandemic, but it's been going on and been leveraged by groups like the ones that were in Ottawa that started out as a protest, we believe, against COVID-19 and devolved into an insurrection, an attack on democracy, and an attack on the Canadian government. Now, here's some interesting things. We have this group of people who've been demonstrating in Ottawa, and they get arrested. We all saw what happened, and the Emergency Act was enacted, and there's plenty of debate about that. I'm not going to get into that. It was enacted, and it was used, and there's a whole bunch of people arrested. Now, here's the piece that I couldn't quite figure out at the beginning and during this activity in Ottawa, the occupation of Ottawa. I'm going to stop calling it the protest. It was the occupation of Ottawa. I was seeing American and Canadian flags at the beginning, and I was scratching my head thinking, why are there American flags when they've gone there to make their voices heard about this vaccine and the mandates and things like that? Wrapped in American flags. But it really became clear because during the bail hearings, we had some of the protesters and their family or friends who were there citing American law in Canada as some of the reasoning for their defense. In fact, one of them said, well, I wasn't read my Miranda rights. Now, if you don't know what the Miranda rights, I bet you if I read, the 5 Miranda rights to you, you'd say, oh yeah, I've heard those. You probably watched them on some TV content, Law and Order or Boys in Blue or whatever the show might be that had the American, legal quotes in it. I'm going to read these to you so you know what they are. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to have an attorney present. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. Do you understand the rights I have just read to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me? Those are the Miranda rights. Those are the Miranda rights that would be read to you if you were a citizen of the United States of America. As a citizen of Canada, we do not get Miranda rights read to us. There are no Miranda rights in that form in Canada. So here's the thing. We've got a bunch of folks who occupied the capital of Canada, draped in American flags, wanting to be read the Miranda rights, believing that what governed them was really the U.S. Bill of Rights, not Canada's charter, and not understanding that there is no equivalency between Section 1 of the Bill of Rights to our charter in Canada. And so looking for protection under the amendments of the American Bill of Rights was not going to be afforded to them. I want to say you can't make this stuff up. I'm not making it up. This stuff is actually happening. The bail hearings, they're actually using the amendments. Folks, what happened in Ottawa was not a protest. What happened in Ottawa was the occupation of the capital of Canada, an insurrection on democracy, and an attempt to overthrow a government that was elected by the people of Canada. Granted, you may not like the system. You may tell me, well, the popular vote really showed something different. Maybe it did, but that's not the system that we have in place. We have a system, and this government got elected. And the way that you go about changing the government is through the democratic process. That's what helps us guarantee the type of law and order that we have so that we could have those freedoms that we do enjoy. Now, I said I wasn't going to get into the whole emergency act being enabled. But here's the thing. We had members of political parties taking photos with some of the people who are occupying Ottawa. Now, I get it. You know, it's just a picture and there's a lot that goes into the picture. The old adage of, you know, picture's worth 1,000 words doesn't always apply because sometimes there's different context to it. But the picture that circulated online was that of Candace Bergen, who's the lead for the Conservative Party of Canada, seemingly in a restaurant booth with some of the occupiers that had taken over Ottawa. We also have some political members openly endorsing what they believe to be the protest under the guise of the occupation, because it didn't stop at a protest. It devolved into the occupation of Ottawa. So now the question has to be asked, and I've asked it online because I'm just curious, but it's this. If some of the people who occupied Ottawa have been charged with consulting to commit mischief, then would the people who associated with those occupiers, some members of the political parties, would they not by association also be looked at being charged for consulting to commit mischief because they did openly endorse them? I don't have the answer to that. But it is a question that I'm curious on what that answer is and what protects them from that charge versus the people who occupied Ottawa. Now, if you're those occupiers, if you're part of the group that occupied Ottawa and you've been arrested, and that's what you've been arrested with, and you're looking over the table and you're looking at some of the political leaders that were on your side and said they had your back, and they're not charged, aren't you kind of scratching your head a little bit, thinking to yourself, hey, did I get screwed over here? Did I think that these political people had my back, but they didn't because they're not in the slammer with me? They're not getting their Miranda rights read to them. Sorry, the Miranda rights, I still can't believe it, and I shouldn't joke around about it. But you get what I'm saying. If you're the occupiers, aren't you sitting there at least questioning what their role was, what their motivation was in openly supporting you? But how come they're not sitting next to you right now? Anyways, I'm going to stop there with this topic. It's consumed a lot of airtime. I think it's going to continue to consume a lot of airtime as the charges get flushed out and as personalities online, whether they're professional journalists or online radio personalities, Everybody's taking a different position on that. Here's what I'm hoping in that community, that nobody gaslights anybody else, that we stick to the facts, that we try to avoid misinformation, and especially try to avoid disinformation. So there is one other topic I wanted to cover off in terms of some current events here in Ontario, Canada, and that is around the license plate stickers. There was an announcement made by the Premier of Ontario on February 22nd that the sticker renewal program would be coming to an end. The Service Ontario website, public site, says that starting on March 13, 2022, Service Ontario will no longer be issuing license plate stickers for passenger vehicles, light-duty trucks, motorcycles, and mopeds. This will eliminate renewal fees and save vehicle owners $120 a year in Southern Ontario and $60 a year in Northern Ontario for passenger and light commercial vehicles. Vehicle owners will receive a check in the mail starting at the end of March and throughout the month of April. There does appear to be a refund that dates back to, I believe, March 2020, but check the website for any of those details and information and how to be able to do that. But here's the interesting thing about this. What I'm really wondering is, okay, maybe it saves me $120 a year, but that's a lot of money. That's a lot of revenue that our government is losing to be able to provide services to us. So then the question is, where is that lost revenue coming back into the government fold? So you might be giving me a discount of this $120, but you got to get it back from somewhere else. Or am I going to lose services from somewhere else? And what type of services will I lose? Now, we just went through a pandemic. Does that mean that you look at the healthcare system and we started to see some privatization of healthcare services. We started to see the selling of medical kits for you to do testing during the pandemic. Is this part of that transition? Are services going to get cut to make up this huge amount of money that's being given back? And you say, well, it's $120 in my pocket. Sure, it is. But am I losing that $120? Am I giving it back somewhere else? Hey, look, it's an election year. I get it. Some people might look at this and say, hey, great, $120 in my pocket. That's what I want this government to do, give money back to me. But I got to ask the question. I don't know the answer. We got to ask the question, where is it coming from? If we're losing that money, where is it coming from, or what services are we going to lose? All right, I am done with those couple of topics. I know I don't usually start the show this way, but they are some very real things that are happening in our local areas, communities, but certainly can impact things globally as we watch things evolve around the world, given this pandemic. All right, let's move on to the next segment. This is the podcast that has something for everyone, and we want to get to some of that something for everyone right now.
All right, let's reset and take a little break, and let's do it with some music. We're going to hear from the Co-Conspirators. This is Will and Catherine with a song called Walk Me Home Tonight. This is off of their new album, and we're going to talk to the Co-Conspirators a little bit later on in the show. So let's have a listen to the tune and then get some more insights a little bit later on. Hope you enjoy it.
When I saw you sitting there in the ballroom light, looking like the kind of girl who'll talk to me tonight. You can tell me anything, just don't tell me lies. Listen to you all night long, won't you talk to me tonight? I could be a friend to you, I could bring some light, I could make you smile sometimes and hold your hand tonight. We can walk on down the street, we could see
right, that is the Co-Conspirators. That is Will Richards, Catherine Simons, with their song Walk Me Home Tonight from their latest album, The Unreliable Narrators. Now, we're going to hear from them just shortly. But first, I wanted to set a little bit of that conversation up because we're going to get into some material and topic that ties back to Black History Month and some of the events that lately have been associated with anti-racism. So as you know, February is Black History Month. This is a piece that I wrote on guidoprano.com. And the title of it, The Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain, is actually the title of a song that Will and Catherine have on their new album called The Unreliable Narrators. And we're going to listen to that song too, and we're going to talk to them about it. But I want to read this to you in recognition of Black History Month and set that up a little bit. So here we go. While the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020 sparked outrage and protests, eventually calling on the necessity for overdue change towards racialized behavior, there were other cases with like outcomes that preceded it. Similar outcomes where fellow human beings who should be equal in all ways, regardless of the languages spoken or skin color, were murdered by people in the community that we all expect would protect us. George Floyd was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin, who was one of 4 who used his knee to ultimately choke George into unconsciousness and eventually his death. George was ultimately murdered over reported suspicion of a $20 counterfeit bill in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Not long before George Floyd's death, on August 24, 2019, Elijah McClain was murdered. Elijah McClain was pursued by police after a call came to them of a man acting suspiciously as he was walking on the sidewalk in Aurora, Colorado. Elijah was a 23-year-old massage therapist with a blood circulation disorder who has been described by many in online posts and journalist accounts as a kind and gentle soul, an introvert, musician, cheerful, charming, humorous, and positive, who often played his violin for stray cats. He was 140 pounds. Elijah was choked by police and subsequently injected with enough ketamine by paramedics to sedate a 190-pound man. Both George Floyd and Elijah McClain uttered the same words, "I can't breathe," leading up to their death. February annually marks Black History Month. It's not just about remembering tragic events among the Black community, but taking those tragic events and continuing to ensure they have meaning while providing learning for our collective communities as we step forward together. It's a month where history is revisited so that we can remember where we have been as we set or reset our path to where we are going. There are many events, positive events, that commemorate those we've lost, but also the accomplishments we've made and a journey towards a more inclusive future. People contribute to historical events and future progress in many ways. A musical duo from Quebec, Canada, called the Co-Conspirators, wrote a song called The Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain. This on their most recent album, The Unreliable Narrators. Ain't causing trouble, ain't up to no good. I'd like to go home, please, sir, if I could. A chilling line in that song that aims to have us see the event through Elijah's eyes. Equally as chilling, but on the minds of many, the song goes on to affirm, Elijah McClain, I hope forever we're calling out your name. You can hear the song on the March episode of the Go On With Guido podcast, and it's complemented by an interview that's coming up with the Co-Conspirators as the song and its meaning are discussed further. While February is Black History Month, it only marks a point in time to remind us so our learning and growth can continue throughout the months following, until we come back around full circle and reflect on our progress and again on the journey ahead of us. This is an opinion article by me, Guido Prino, of the Go On With Guido podcast. Now, let's get to the interview, our chat with Will Richards and Catherine Simons. They are the Co-Conspirators. I would like to welcome to the show from Hemingford, Quebec, Will Richards and Catherine Simons, the Canadian singer-songwriters folk duo known as
the Co-Conspirators. Will, Catherine, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And how are you doing today?
Hey there. We're doing great. We're here in Parksville, British Columbia, and it's absolutely gorgeous day.
Yeah, we've been out here for 3 months, and it's wonderful to get away from that Eastern Canada snow and cold. And we had a little bit before Christmas, but right now it's about 12 degrees. It's sunny. We're looking at the ocean, and, can't complain. Lots of shows going on too, so.
That sounds beautiful, looking at the ocean, 12 degrees. Just, today here where I am in Richmond Hill, it hit 9 degrees. But not to get too excited, we're expecting a snowstorm in the next 2 days. We're going to get 20 centimeters of snow apparently, and it's going to fall back down to -10. So it's a short-lived gift, but I'll take them wherever I can get them. I got you swerved me a little bit with the, hey, we're out in Vancouver Island, British Columbia, because I was all excited that, I was like, oh, hey, they're in Quebec, and I looked it up because I didn't know where Hemmingford, Quebec was, but I got excited.
It's a pretty small place.
It is, but not that far from Montreal.
Right, 45 minutes south of Montreal. We've only been there about just a little over a year. We decided that since neither of us had go-to day jobs anymore, we decided to get out of the city. I've been in Montreal for a long, long time.
I've been in Montreal. I was born in Montreal, so I never left until now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, am I allowed to ask? Are you hockey fans?
Of course. we are Montrealers, so we are of course hockey fans. And yes, it's been a bad year, but the highs of last year were pretty high and pretty cool. So this year we're taking a little bit of a breather.
I am also a huge Montreal Canadiens fan.
Excellent.
Have been all my life, and in one of my earlier shows, I talk about. I actually interviewed Ryan Walter, former Stanley Cup champion with the Canadiens. Yep. And I was telling him a story about how I was John Beliveau's bodyguard for a day.
No.
So, oh, really?
Yeah. I've interwoven with the Montreal Canadiens one way or another throughout my whole life. So, this makes our show even better. Sorry for anybody who's not Montreal Canadiens fans who are listening, but they all know because I often talk about them during the show. So we didn't connect tonight to talk about hockey and things like that. But we were going to connect to talk about music and your music. And I understand that both of you now have been doing this Co-Conspirators thing for a few years. How did you come together to on this? I don't want to call it a project, but how did you come together to be the Co-Conspirators?
Well, about 7 years ago, we met the old-fashioned way in a bar in Montreal, and it was a mutual friend's birthday party. And we met. And then a couple of years later, I guess we started singing together. And in fact, the first song on our new album, The Unreliable Narrators, the first song on there is about the night that we met, and it's called Walk Me Home Tonight. So that's kind of fun and romantic.
Yeah. So we dated for a couple of years, and then it took me quite some effort to get Catherine. Catherine comes from a musical family, a very musical family, and she's sang in choirs and whatnot. But it did take quite a bit of effort to get her to sing with me, because I've been a musician pretty much my whole life. And I was doing a rock band at the time, and that sort of, has been off and on for 20 plus years. And then that sort of fell apart. And so it's like, let's do this. Let's do something where we can sing together. And because singing together is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So we decided to do that. And since the opportunity arose to sort of like make this our full-time job, we took it. And we haven't really looked back in 3 years now.
That's a heartwarming start to the whole thing, right? You connect and you find this sort of mutual talent in music, right? And I mean, music is so universal and it just brings so many people together anyways. Mm-hmm. But to have done it with, it seems like a certain level of trust that has come out of your music relationship as well.
Huge amount. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know what, when I listen to your music, it kind of you know, emotes in the music as well, between the two of you. I didn't know any of the background story before we started talking, but there's an element of the music where I can look and you know, as I'm listening to it now and think, yeah, you know what, there's something else going on in the music too.
Yeah.
We did a show on Sunday down in Victoria, and a woman in the audience, without any prompting, without any prior knowledge, said, "You two probably wouldn't be so good if you weren't so in love." I'm like, yeah, it has its upside. So, you know.
I think those types of comments that come from the audience are some of the best. They're just organic, right? The spotlight is on you on the stage, and you've got all these folks looking at you and observing things, and I think they're real. Like, people are real when they say those things. They're real observances.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, Will, you alluded to playing a little bit of you know, rock and roll beforehand, and I introduced the two of you as a folk duo, but it's not just folk. There's you kind of dive into other areas as well in your music, right? Like, there's other elements that are complementing your sound as the Conspirators.
Yeah, for sure. I think on a conscious level, there's sort of elements of country and bluegrass and gospel, and you sort of straight ahead singer-songwriter stuff. But I think on a more sort of subconscious or unconscious level, there's my background as I played in noisy rock bands like Dinosaur Jr. type of rock bands, and you know, like The Fall and things like that. Catherine comes from a classically trained French horn and percussion, so whilst those things don't directly inform the music, I think they lie underneath everything that we create, and it comes through in less obvious ways.
So does Catherine, do you bring the calm to the storm? Is that what
I'm going to say yes to that.
And I'm going to say yes too, because I kind of have to.
I don't know. Well, I think I might have caught on to something there. So it does. So and the reason I asked is because it does, as I'm listening to the different songs, you know, all these different sounds and influences do seem to come out for me, and hopefully as other listeners tune into your music, they're going to see that as well, and it just has a much larger reach when that happens. Now, Catherine, you mentioned about the new album. You released a new full-length 12-song album that was on January 5th of this year. It is called The Unreliable Narrators. I'm always interested in the title. If there's a story behind the title, I'd love to know it. So you released a new full-length 12-song album, and that was back on January 5th. It's called The Unreliable Narrators, as you said. So I'm always interested in knowing what you know, might have brought on the naming of the album that way. So if you're inclined to tell us that, we'd certainly appreciate it. But also, you know, for the listeners, does the album give us a fully musical, expanded experience of the Co-Conspirators with all of the sounds, you know, from the different areas of music that you've practiced over the years?
Yeah, I think the Unreliable Narrators, I think, is a little bit different from our first album, because it's sort of more a reflection of what we do live. So it's a more sparse, it's really a duet album with, well, other things added for sure, but it really focuses on the singers and the guitar. But Will can answer you about the naming of the album, because that's very interesting.
Yeah, the naming, I mean, an unreliable narrator is a literary term, or somebody who is telling you a story, but you have to figure out what is the truth within that story. They may believe they're telling you the truth, but they're not. So it's one of these things when you approach songwriting, it's like you can tell things very straight ahead, It's like a newspaper report. Or you can create it more like an impressionist painting where you're just giving this vague sort of outlines to fill in. Or you can just outright lie to your audience, consciously lie, to create a certain impression. And that's what we, in storytelling through songs, we're trying to mix up all these things on the record that are truth, fiction, are just general sort of vagaries, impressionistic strokes.
I love the fact that there's actual meaning behind the naming of the album and artistic meaning as well. So
we ran with that theme too, because you've seen the cover, eh?
Yeah.
The orange. Well, what we did is we took the old Penguin books that from somebody of our age. Like I grew up reading Penguin books, and they were always the same cover with just different text. They were orange with an amber, orange, and then beige, and then an orange strip. They all look the same. So that's what we modeled the album cover after as well, to go with the literary theme. And the booklet for the album is laid out, rather than put the lyrics as if they were poetry, we put them as if they were prose. So each song becomes a chapter of this story that, starts with the meeting and ends with, well, we don't know what. So.
There's something to be said about the thought that you just put into that and into the creation and all of that. I've always loved opening an album. Never mind just the fact that you get that sort of fresh album smell when you open something physical in your hands, but it's always been part of the experience. And then, opening the leaflet and looking at the art and seeing how things were laid out. And it's something that doesn't quite exist all the time anymore these days because of the digital downloads and everything online and things like that. Absolutely. But I still, my preference is to hold it in my hand and to have that experience, which I mean, you've captured so many elements of it with the cover and the naming and things like that. So I think folks, if they can get their hands on a physical copy, I would recommend that just based on what we've heard, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's always the thing. And I mean, if you drop us your address too, we'll send you one, because I know you've got the download. So
love scoring that. That's great.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that Will and I learned how to do bookbinding. So we've actually made a bunch of books with the album in it. So those are kind of fun because they're all unique.
Yeah, it's like a hardcover. We call it the hardcover version because it's basically the same packaging, but instead of a jewel case, it's a hardcover book. So it's kind of cool.
Now, is that something, if somebody comes to see you live, is that something they could pick up at one of your shows?
Yeah, absolutely. Or we are going to make it available online very shortly.
Yeah.
Oh, right on.
Yep.
Right on.
We have to make some more.
Let me ask you about a particular song. Because when you go to your website, it's along the bottom of the website. I can click play and it's the song that I hear, and I don't know if that's by design, but it's a song on the album called The Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain. Of course, Elijah was murdered in 2019 by police and paramedics in Aurora, Colorado. What motivated you to write that song? And was it something difficult that you did as you chronicled the event in music?
Okay, before we get that answer from Will, let's take a quick break and hear from one of our friends of the podcast.
Recipes at My Table is a work of family, love of food, and sharing of stories. The stories keep the memories alive and make every day a party in my kitchen. Join me for the sharing of traditional Italian recipes and so much more. Visit me at www.recipesatmytable.com.
So just before that quick break, I had asked Will about chronicling the events of Elijah McClain in the song and how they went about doing that. So let's get back to that and hear what the answer to that is.
Of course, Elijah was murdered in 2019 by police and paramedics in Aurora, Colorado. What motivated you to write that song? And was it something difficult that you did as you chronicled the event in music?
Which is extremely difficult. And even like now, I mean, the song's about 18, at least a year old. Even now, performing it live, there's sometimes when I just sort of like, I'm thinking about it, thinking about the incident rather than performing a song, and it still becomes excruciatingly difficult. I mean, there's one time we were doing a show back home, and I looked over at one point, and a friend of mine was sitting just off to my left, and she was crying. So, of course, I start crying too. I'm just like, oh my God, this is just like, yeah. But so, yeah, it was a difficult process, and it remains a difficult process. Given the subject matter too, you had to be, as a songwriter, you had to be super careful with the language. But you still have to present it in a not necessarily a free form style. But yeah, it was tough to write. But the motivation came from there's countless instances of this kind of behavior. But the thing that made the Elijah McClain stick out is that he just seemed like a very gentle soul. He was a very small guy. He was only 130 pounds. He was gentle and soft-spoken. And the tragedy of these people that, if you ever really, really want to get yourself down, try listening to this body cam audio of the incident when he was stopped by police. And here's this young man, he's just pleading with these people to not do this. And you can hear it, and all you hear from the police is, stop resisting, the usual sort of crap that comes out during these things. So it just struck me particularly as like this was, it almost felt like this was sport for these people. That it's like, oh, here's some low-hanging fruit that we can easily harass and da-da-da-da. And then he ends up dead. And as you said, as I use the term, he's murdered. He's murdered. He wasn't assaulted by police. He wasn't this or that. He was murdered by the police and the paramedics. And at the time of writing, and actually up until about November of last year, these people were still walking around with no consequences, which is, it's infuriating. They have been charged now. I believe the 3 police officers and 2 of the paramedics. I'm not sure how that stands right now. I haven't checked in a little while. But in general, it was just how gentle a person this was that came to this brutal end at the hands of brutal people that really sort of prompted this response.
So when you perform this live, this song? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Do you guys do a bit of an intro on it or anything like that, or?
To be honest, it depends on the context in which we're playing, because we do quite a few pub shows and the like, and we'll always perform it, but it does at times, like, you don't want to get too into it because you don't want it's in the context. You don't necessarily want to be talking to people about this really tragic thing. But if it's a listening audience of especially of music fans, they want to know where the songs come from. So then in that context, we will talk about
like
it
in a house concert situation. We will get into it. And often people will have questions about it afterwards too, even after the show's over. They'll come up to us after and say, tell us more about this. So,
well, it was very well done and well captured. It's sometimes when you set out to capture these types of events, it's easy for us to force the lyric or force the song, and that's not the case at all with this song. I think it just chronicles it, and it chronicles in a way that you want to keep listening and you're learning at the same time. So yeah. I wanted to point that out. I think sometimes, we get caught up in the music, and music serves all sorts of purpose, but we get caught up in the fun of the music and things like that. But we can also use music as a learning tool. And I think that the Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain, as the both of you performed it, is certainly that. And I wanted to thank you for doing that.
No, thank you. That's sort of the response that we're looking for. So it's good to know that it does get out there and create that reaction.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, the show does have a diverse audience, and schools do pick it up as well. And so I was hoping that it would serve that purpose of education for them as well, as I'm sure it will. I want to ask, you mentioned earlier, and I'm going back to the title of the album, which is The Unreliable Narrators, and you kind of gave us the gist of how that got named and what that means. But I want to know this: are all the songs on the new album based on true stories?
Well, somebody's truth, not necessarily mine.
Oh, there we go.
And never what do they say? Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Right.
So I do regard what we do as being storytellers. So yeah, we're telling stories, and some of them are true, and some of them are based on observations that other people I see experience in, and then some of them are just like complete sort of fabrications, but that doesn't mean it doesn't speak to somebody's experience.
Do you ever get family or friends saying, "Is that about me?"
Funny, you should ask. Well, I'm always a little nervous, but I mean, there's a song on our new record called "Young Billy," which is when I was a kid, I was known as Billy. So it's addressing myself from much earlier, and I grew up in a very tumultuous household, and I'm sure that if any of my siblings sort of listened closely to that song, they'd be like, "Oh, that's what that's about." I don't think they do, so that's okay. But there's also, like, I have a very close friend that another song, "The Promise," is about. It's about the relationship that I've had with them over the last 30 plus years, 35 years from, and the sort of the problematic aspects that we've gone through and that I brought to it, and yeah, I don't want to give specifics too much.
No. Hey, we're getting the raw details here. Like this is very transparent of you, and we appreciate that. It's always anytime an artist is willing to share that additional insight, it just the listener listens to the song maybe a little bit differently.
For sure.
Absolutely.
When we do live shows, it's obviously we talk too much, or I talk too much. And I'm trying to think. And the part of being a performer is finding that balance, right? So.
Yeah. So, Catherine, he says he talks too much. Do you get the mic on the stage at all, or?
No, I'm actually quite shy on the stage. I'm happy with him doing all the talking. Once in a while, I'll interject if he's like tuning his guitar or something. I'll find something, mundane or witty, I don't know, to say. But I try to find something to say. Yeah. So
how is this album different than the debut album, Shadowing the Organ Tuner?
So Shadowing the Organ Tuner was full band version of a bunch of our songs, and including, bass and drums and lead guitar and all that stuff. But also I have a cousin that played cello on one song?
Some Other Life.
Yeah. And my sister plays violin on a song, and
Mark played clarinet.
That's right, my brother Mark. So there's a lot of help from our friends, shall we say, on the first album, and it's really full band. Whereas this album is like I said earlier, it's a lot more about the vocal harmonies, and it's far more. It's sparse, There are still invited guests. Absolutely, there's a harmonica player from Montreal that joins us on one song.
John Kirkhoven, one of the greatest harmonica players you'll ever hear. He really is.
Yeah. And again, my sister joins us on Elijah McClain. Actually, she plays violin. Elijah McClain, just to go back to that for a second, he was a violin player, Elijah McClain, and he used to go to the SPCA, I guess the animal shelter, and he used to play his violin for the animals.
Yeah.
So we thought that it was appropriate to have just this gorgeous violin in the background in that song. What else? Who else is on that? Oh, my cousin plays musical saw in one of our songs.
On the new one, yeah.
On the new. So as much as it is,
my son plays trumpet.
And your son plays trumpet.
Oh wow!
Right?
The whole family is musically inclined. This is pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
Cheap labor.
So as much as this is much more a sparse album, I think it's so lovely to have the different tone qualities and added to it.
I think part of the thing with the sorry if I just may, part of the thing with the first album, I think as vocalists we were not sure enough of ourselves to be able to just put our voices up front there. So I think as a couple of years went by and we got better at this, we were able to just step back and say, all you need is these two voices and a basic background of guitar. So I think it was a confidence thing that made this a much more sort of vocal-oriented record.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I was you're in line and you're going down the path that I was going to go down, which is it seems like a journey, right? And from the shadowing the organ tuner to this one, just the path and the journey and the growth that it seems that the both of you have done together. And you mentioned there's a couple of things you mentioned there, right? You went back to the Elijah McClain song and just again, the extras, right? Adding the violin because he played the violin. There's so many tidbits in that just continue to make that special. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned the cello, and the first time I listened to a cello. The first song where I had heard a cello was with listening to a song by Harry Chapin. I think it was called Mr. Tanner, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So that was my first introduction to cello. So you're hitting all these different instruments and taking me down my own journey as I'm reflecting on your comments about your albums.
Nice. Well, check out the musical Saw on The Only Road Through Town. From the new record. That's what you might think is a theremin is actually somebody playing the saw.
Really?
It's actually a saw that you chop wood, that you saw wood with.
Yeah.
It's like,
no way.
Yeah, it's bowed. You hold it between your knees and then you bend the tip of the saw and then you bow it with a cello bow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Cool. I'm gonna listen just for the saw. I'm interested in this because we've talked about a bunch of several of your songs off of the different albums. And when I spin music over on my online radio station, the Path Radio Mix, on Mondays, I do mini concert Mondays where I say, I take 3 songs from artists and I play 3 songs in a row. So if I was to do a mini concert of the Co-Conspirators, what 3 songs would you say are the 3 songs that we should play?
Do we have to agree on it,
No.
Catherine and I?
We do not.
No. Well, hey, you know what? Let me. Are we close? Are the two of you close on the 3 songs at least?
Yeah.
Or?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, let's hear it. What
I'll
would
let
we
Catherine
do?
go first.
Yeah.
Well, for sure, Elijah McClain, no question. Walk Me Home Tonight, because it is the story of us. And but my third choice would be You Shone So Bright. And that is a song that is incredibly dear to my heart. It stems from the sudden death of my very best friend's daughter. She died at age 19 from sudden cardiac arrest. There was no known.
Wow.
They didn't know that she had any issues at all. She just one morning was getting ready for school, and they found her a little later, and she had just died.
Tragic.
So that is
All right.
You Shone So Bright. She was just a beautiful girl inside and out. She was just lovely. And so a couple of years ago when she died, we were on tour and I flew directly to London from, where were we, Winnipeg?
Winnipeg.
And Will continued the trip out here on his own. Luckily, we had no shows at the time, but he and while I was in London with my friend during that tragic time, Will wrote the song, and then we worked on it. We have not been able to perform it. It is too impossible. It is just too difficult.
Well, I mean, you're honoring her memory with that, and it sounds like close to the heart on that one, right?
Absolutely. Even recording it was a difficult, just so difficult. But it is absolutely gorgeous song. I can say that, having not written it. I did, of course, have a lot to do with the harmonies, and but it really is a beautiful song.
I would agree with Catherine on two of the three. I would go with Elijah McClain, Walk Me Home, and Young Billy.
You want to explain?
No, I can't talk about Young Billy too much. I think if I look at those three songs, there's a wide range of emotion in there. If you start with like the joyous thing that Walk Me Home is, it's like this meeting, this start of new love and all that. And then you have the reaction to the Elijah McClain situation, which is, anger and sadness. And then for myself, for Young Billy, it speaks to something that I've struggled with since it's one of those things that since you became aware that it was an issue sort of thing, that I've always had a hard time with what that song's about. And it's still to this day, there's aspects of my childhood that sort of haunt me and really, give me pause. So it's, it is a tricky song. I do love performing it because it feels slightly cathartic, and we perform it very well, I think.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the answer is it's impossible to choose three.
We came close.
You know what I'll do, because you have two of the same, and then the one that's different. So I'll swap them out. So one week I'll do Catherine's, and then the next week I'm going to do yours.
Ideal.
There we go. And we're going to do I'll do a mini concert of the Co-Conspirators on the radio. So
wonderful.
Something folks can look forward to. Now you've mentioned touring, guys. You've mentioned touring a bunch of times. And it sounds like you toured up until March 2020, and then the pandemic, which we will not speak of, hit, and you took a break along with everybody else, it seems. But you have recently resumed touring. You're out in BC right now, and I understand this coming weekend, Saturday, you're at the El Faro Market in Parksville, BC, and you have other dates as well. Are you going to be adding more dates, spring and summer? Are you coming back across the country the other way? Any insights we can get on your touring?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two more shows here on the island. This tomorrow, actually, at Church Street Tap House. So it's
in Comox.
In Comox, and it's a bit of so it's going to be a pub show for sure. And then on Saturday, at El Faro, it's a market and cafe, and it's got amazing food actually. And I'm kind of looking forward to having dinner before we play. And it's a listening audience for sure. And that's here in Parksville. And then we head to Vancouver, and we've got a couple of shows there. And we're going to do a photo shoot there. I think it's time for that again. Yep. And then we have a show in Nelson, and then we're heading on home to Quebec.
We're just starting to book the spring and summer now. We've got a small Ontario run on the go. And then over the summer, we are heading back out here. I think we can officially say it now, is that we've been invited to play the Vancouver Island Folk Festival.
Hey, cool.
So we're heading back, and we're trying to add a few other festivals and stops along the way for that. So yeah, we never actually stopped. There was limited opportunities.
Detours.
So we what we're trying to do this summer is get back on it hard and sort of travel as much as possible, because traveling is a lot of fun. Going to new places. It's tiresome sometimes, but going to new places, talking to new people, all that sort of thing is really a huge part of what makes this a wonderful job to have.
Well, I'm hoping if you get the list of other places that you're going to be booking, and if you share it with me, I'll share it with the audience, and
Well, thank you.
and maybe I'll have the opportunity to catch you live. I certainly miss seeing live music over the last couple of years myself. It's something I enjoy very much. So hopefully I can meet you somewhere and see you live and do that. I got to tell you this, another one of my another person that sort of weaves into my show many times, because I was such a fan of his, was Stuart McClain. The vinyl cafe, Stuart McClain, and I had his producer Jess Milton as a guest last year, and we did a show together. I gotta think, like, when I hear some of your songs, that if Stuart was still around, I'd see you on a Stuart McClain show at some point, because you just seem to have that sound and that Canadian quality that he would bring on the show and kind of say, hey, why don't you listen to these guys over here? Just listen to this. And so in the back of my mind, that's the connection I made when I started hearing or listening to your music. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, that's very nice.
I want to ask this, and we talked a little bit about touring. Is there a story that you can share with us from your touring? Something that stuck with you, whether it's having met somebody or something having not quite gone as planned, or whatever the case may be. We're always interested in what goes on behind the scenes as our musicians go on the road.
There are countless. Like I said, this is part of the reason we do it. The one that always comes to mind for me is when we played Cadillac, Saskatchewan. Now, for those who don't know what Cadillac, Saskatchewan is, which is pretty much everybody, you go to Swift Current and then you turn south for about 30 miles. Just before you hit the border, there's a white spot in the road called Cadillac. And we ended up playing there, and I don't even know how we ended up playing there, but we ended up there, and there'd been a death in our family, and so we were held. We couldn't get there as quickly as we wanted to, so we sort of did 3 days of really, really hard driving to get to Cadillac, and we show up, and it's one of those bars where all the sort of people from the farms and tiny communities gather. So it's rural Saskatchewan, very, very, very conservative. And the owner had booked in a meet and greet for the local conservative candidate, I believe for the federal election that night. So we're playing our songs, which, I'm a self-described socialist and very much a leftist. And, we sing songs of resistance like Bella Ciao and these things, social justice and workers' rights songs. And here's this pompous ass in his very, very clean cowboy boots. Never trust a man in clean cowboy boots. He's not a cowboy. His big hat, and he's going around shaking hands with everyone. But what happened at that show is we played, and after every song, there was just dead silence, like no response from any song whatsoever.
All you could hear was the clanking of the forks and knives as they ate their meals.
So at the end of it, we're like, all right, we're done. We did our best, and, da-da-da. But then the owner comes up and says, can you do another set? Everybody loved you. I'm like, really? And they're not going to show that in any shape, form, or way?
No.
So we ended up doing another set, and we did end up talking with a few people afterwards, and they were like, oh, yeah, no, you guys are really good, really good. I'm like, well, where's the response?
It was such an odd night.
Yeah,
very odd.
The Conservative MP was sort of like the cherry on the top there. It was just like,
No feedback, but everybody was just listening, it sounds like. So
yeah.
But yeah, I guess it would be an odd experience. You're thinking, well, they're not really into us, or they're not really listening, but they are, and they just didn't show it in a way that the more common audience might have shown.
Exactly. But then I have another story that's a short story that when we were in Victoria a couple of years ago, we played a show in a little cafe, and at the end of our set, we said, "Oh, we've got to get packed up. We're going to go find ourselves a motel for the night," because we decided we didn't want to drive back to Parksville. And this couple came up to us and said, "Oh, we don't normally do this, but do you guys want to stay at our place?" And it was such a shock to us. And we're like, well, yeah, sure. But it was very odd, but they were so welcoming and so kind. And, once we established that nobody was, an axe murderer or anything, we stayed there. And they said, "Oh, and we have to go to a tennis match in the morning, so you're welcome to just lock the door on your way out."
Wow.
I know, it was shocking to us.
We're big city people. It's just like, we would never.
No, but you know what? That's the nice side of Canada. I'll take the nice side of Canada, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So those are two of the really fun stories that we remember. But honestly, there are so many.
The dude.
And again, thanks. Those are good. Thanks for sharing those with us. It always, again, it helps people connect when you hear those things, because there are some wonderful and odd things that happen as you go from town to town. I can't thank you enough. I just looked down. I couldn't believe we were talking as long as we've been talking. And I don't want to take up your time. I know you've got other shows and things that you've got on the go the next couple of days. But what I wanted to ask is, I've been asking you all the questions and sort of, getting what I was hoping the audience might want to hear and things like that. But as we close things out, is there anything that you want to leave us with that maybe I didn't ask you or that you wanted to share? Is there anything that you wanted to do or say to us?
What I would like to say is that I think now more than ever, we need live music in our lives. So we'd really like to encourage everybody to go out and hear some live music and support musicians as much as you can, and support the arts as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we need a sense of community now. There's a huge division in this country right now, in every country. But I think when we get out there and we perform in front of people and we see what this does for people, and it brings this sort of sense of unity and community that is lacking. So I would also encourage everyone, don't be afraid. You will be okay. Go out, see some live music, spend a little money with these people, with the artists and the establishments. And that way we can get back to sort of being the community that we are, whether it's a community at a coffee shop or a community as a country.
Thank you for saying that. That is the Co-Conspirators. Talking about community, I would like to thank Will and Catherine, Canada's Co-Conspirators from Hemmingford, Quebec, currently out in BC on tour, for sharing their music and stories with us. And know that they are coming to a venue near you as the most reliable, unreliable narrators. I will have all of the resources and links and contact information on show notes, music, websites, social media, etc. on the Co-Conspirators in the podcast notes. Will, Catherine, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much.
So there you have it. They're the Co-Conspirators, Catherine and Will. It was exciting and fun to have them on the show. We are going to listen to their song, The Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain, here in just a moment. You can also hear their music over on thepathradio.com. It's going to feature their music on Mini Concert Monday. So we're going to have 3 of the songs from each of them on that segment. And then on Sundays after 1 p.m., you can hear those on thepathradio.com. Or, of course, hey, you can always come back and re-listen to the podcast. But I will have in the podcast notes links where you can go and purchase the songs so that you can have them on your personal devices and listen to them anytime you want and support the Co-Conspirators. So, for now, here is The Lonesome Death of Elijah McClain. This is the Co-Conspirators.
like to play my violin for the street cats going by. But they don't hear you, their heads too full of hate. They see your colored skin and they cannot relate. Somebody's son, 130 pounds. 3 policemen crushed him to the ground. McClain, I hope forever we're calling out your name. So many questions we'd like the answers to. Will there ever be justice for you? And to those who hide behind the blue, what the hell kind of men are you? It's the truth and it needs to be said. It's 'cause of you that this young man is dead. Ain't coming home.
That is the Co-Conspirators, Will and Catherine. What a fantastic song with the lonesome death of Elijah McClain. We're going to hear a little bit more from them towards the end of the show with another song. So stay tuned for that. Now, let's get to our next topic. Now, over the course of the last couple of months, we've been looking at different trends, whether they be in family or homes or food or things of that nature. And I was inspired to do segments of that regard because I had picked up the Old Farmer's Almanac. And there's a whole bunch of interesting things in there. So the topic that I started reading a little bit more about this month was pets and what animal trends might be like for 2022. And that sort of led me to explore other pieces of information from different sites online. And I'm going to share that with you as well. But I thought it was kind of interesting because as we're maybe on the tail end of the pandemic, maybe in the middle of it, we don't really know yet. But I thought, what was the impact of pets on household families during the pandemic? And there's some interesting numbers that are going to come up as far as that goes. But before we get to that, here's some interesting things. This is from the Almanac. That what are cats and dogs eating? And there is a trend that pet food is being provided with insect-based protein. So you've got fly larvae that are fed food waste and crickets, and that's finding its way into pet food, as well as some grains, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, and also some plant-based ingredients like kale and blueberries and spinach. And that might be a little bit different than what has been put into some of the pet foods historically in the past. Now, when we look at numbers in the United States, 84.9 million U.S. households have at least one pet. 14% of current pet owners there got a dog in 2020. 12% of current pet owners got a cat in 2020. So dogs outpacing the cats in terms of the pandemic, that first pandemic maybe year. But 47% of pet owners are now also buying lower cost store brands of pet food more frequently than in the past. And so that lines up with the different numbers that we read in past episodes about inflation and whatnot. So it's spilling over into the pet market too. Now, here's some interesting trends: is that there are pet bowls that will now automatically reorder pet food. So as it gets to a certain level, it's obviously connected. The Internet of Things. Our pet bowls are now connected to the Internet of Things, where some communication gets sent to whatever company you're set up with, and it'll automatically reorder the food, and it could just show up. The other trend is with some of the accessories, toys, leashes, collars. More and more of that is now being made from recycled materials. The other interesting trends that the Almanac explores is really around technology and how that's working its way into how we interpret what's happening with pets. We have devices that we wear on our wrists, whether it's, if I go product-wise, Apple Watch or the Fitbits that give us feedback on our activities, our vital signs, and our body functions and things like that, where we might be, GPS locations. Well, technology for pets is being developed where we can extract that information from devices that we place on the pets. And so homeowners are now becoming informed pet owners before maybe they even get to a veterinarian, by having an understanding of what might be going on health-wise with their pets. Now, have you ever looked at your dog and thought, geez, I wonder how the dog's feeling or what mood they're in? Sometimes they're wagging their tail and you can kind of figure out if they're happy or anxious. But technology has been built into collars that can help identify a dog's mood based on the sound of its bark. I imagine that, there might be some tone and fluctuations in there that are set up as well. But that might help you in terms of how you interact with the dog. Or maybe try to calm it down or get it happier, whatever the case may be. But that's worked into that technology. And there's a set of training now that's happening as part of the trend where pets are being trained on how to use devices, whether they're push button or audio devices, to execute a set of commands through that technology. So after diving into the Almanac and kind of getting that information, I turned my attention and I did a little bit of research online just about some additional pet statistics and things like that, and costs. And I was quite surprised. Now these figures were provided by Petpedia, and they set out to identify some key pet adoption statistics for 2022. And they're saying the annual expense for a dog is somewhere between $1,500 to $9,000, and that's in U.S. funds. They've identified that the USA has the largest global dog and cat population. However, a quarter of pets end up in shelters, and they've basically been abandoned by their owners. So 25% of pets in the shelters have been abandoned by their owners. That's quite sad, actually. You think about the euphoria of getting the pet and being excited and then having to abandon it. Now, North American pet insurance, in 2019, pet insurance surpassed $1.7 billion. That's astronomical for pet insurance. Continuing with costs and astronomical numbers, in 2020, there was an estimated $99 billion spent on pets. And we now know that pet ownership in America has increased by more than about 300%. So sticking with some odds and ends, they've also identified that almost all black cats that end up in a shelter are euthanized. And some of the reasons given are basic ignorance or perhaps even superstition, of adopting or owning a black cat. So that's just another stat where you scratches your head and say, are we making decisions based on the color of the cat, and apparently that is indeed happening. So if we get into some comparisons between cats and dogs, here's something interesting. And again, this is provided from the American Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They've provided this through Petpedia, and that people seem to adopt stray cats much more than they do dog. When we look at where does that cat dog pet population come from, you've got 23% of dogs come from shelters, 6% are picked up from the streets, 34% come from breeders, and then 20% come from friends and family. Now, by contrast, when we look at what's going on with cats, 31% come from shelters, 28% from friends and family. Only 3% of cat adoptions are coming from breeders. And then 27% of cats come just from off the streets. They're stray cats, abandoned from wherever. And that really speaks to the abandonment, because a quarter of pets that are in shelters have basically been abandoned by their owners. So if you think of a quarter of them are in shelters, and then you look at how many cats are being picked up as stray cats that don't even make it to the shelter. So I think it's important, if you're going to make a decision to get a pet, that you are prepared, with the responsibilities that come with that pet, so that you can care for it accordingly. Now, as I continued to look at statistics and what's going on with pets, I came across Abacus data, and they had an article from David Coletto, who identified a whole bunch of statistics. So here's the interesting. Well, in terms of Canada now, 56% of Canadians have at least one pet in their household, and the most popular of the pets are, of course, dogs and cats. Now, when you look at pet ownership by region, Quebec and Atlantic Canada seem to be leading the way at that 64 to 65% range. Ontario's at 56, Saskatchewan, Manitoba's at around 47, Alberta's at 50, British Columbia's at 49, almost 50. And these stats are across a survey that was conducted between June 4th and 9th, 2021, of up to about 1,500 Canadians. Now, 32% of Canadians own a dog, and 31% of Canadians own a cat. Again, 1,500 surveyed during that time period. There's absolutely no demographic difference in the type of pet people own. Those under 44 are as likely to own a cat or dog as those 45 or over. So owning a pet doesn't seem to drive that particular bar any which way. During the pandemic, now this is a large number. During the pandemic, percentage-wise, I'm going to say it's 3% of Canadians got a pet over the pandemic when they didn't have one before. 3%, though, translates into 900,000 Canadian adults getting a pet during the pandemic. That really ties into another statistic where they have said that almost all pet owners believe that the pets bring joy into their lives and improve their quality of life. And certainly during the pandemic, that's what folks were looking for that validation and for that joy where there was void because of it. And now, hopefully that doesn't translate into some of the earlier statistics we talked about where, if things start to shift back to maybe a normal life cycle for them, they don't start to abandon them, or they don't end up in shelters. But 98% of those surveyed in Canada say that the pet brought joy into their life. 94% consider the pet to be a member of the family. Also 94% say that the pet has improved their quality of life. And then lastly, 72% say that the pets have encouraged them to stay more active. And so we see that there might be some additional exercise and tertiary benefits happening because of the pet. Now, we know that in Ontario, they're coming up to a provincial election. We don't know when the federal election is going to happen, but these next stats, they looked in the study at the federal vote intention by pet ownership. So if you own a dog or you own a cat, or you own fish or whatever, if you don't have any pets at all, are you likely to vote for any type of particular political party? And what they found was that the short answer is really no, you're not. Those who own pets would versus those who don't would vote very similarly. Now, having said that, they looked and said, hey, if you own a dog, which way would you vote federally? And 33% of dog owners were voting liberal, 32% were voting conservative, and 19% were voting NDP. If you owned a cat, 28% were voting liberal, 26% were voting conservative, and 22% were voting NDP. If you owned a fish, 33% were voting liberal, 30% were voting conservative, and 18% were voting NDP. And if you didn't have any pets at all, 34% were voting liberal, 31% were voting conservative, and 17% were voting NDP. Zero correlation between pet ownership and who you're going to vote for in an election. However, still interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how those numbers might change in the next election, and if there's any impact there. All right, so that brings to conclusion this short segment on pet ownership and trends for 2022. Hopefully you enjoyed that from the different sources that we explored, being the Farmer's Almanac, the Abacus data, and of course, Petpedia. And you just look those up online and you could probably read a little bit more in depth. But I think I wanted to do the pet thing because of the pandemic, and largely because as I was reading and I was noticing that while the trend went up that we are getting more pets, there's also seems to be a trend where some pets are being abandoned and euthanized for different reasons, and just raising our awareness around pet ownership and what some of the responsibilities might be when we take that on. Okay, we've come to the part of the podcast where we're turning our attention to sports. Typically, what we have in this segment is the Four Fans Talk Sports. Unfortunately, we are minus one fan for this show due to technical difficulties related to the internet way down in South Detroit, as Journey would say, which is really Windsor, Ontario. So, hey, internet providers down there, fix it. So we've gone ahead and we have a segment for you. We're going to cover off the Super Bowl. We're going to talk about the Leafs and the Habs and some of the ref moments in that loss that the Leafs recently experienced to the Habs. We're going to talk about the Olympics. And then, of course, the Arizona Coyotes and their 5,000-seat arena in the NHL. Now, before we get to that, I'm just going to also let you know that if you like the sports section and you want to hear more of it more often, we are doing a spin-off show called It's Not the Ref. It's a podcast. It's a shorter podcast, be done a little bit more frequently, hopefully to capture a little bit more of the current events. It may creep into the Four Fans Talk Sports in future monthly shows. We'll see about that. But for now, here is your monthly podcast with the Four Fans Talk Sports on the Go On with Guido podcast. All right, podcast listeners, welcome to a special edition of our show. It's called It's Not the Ref, part of the Four Fans Talk Sports. We are minus one of the four fans tonight. Roland can't be with us due to technical difficulties, which we're going to get resolved. You hear us out there in Windsor, Cogeco, resolve the internet issues. But we do have Clark out in Detroit, Michigan, and we have Brian up in Barrie, Ontario, and we're here to talk. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Right on. So a whole bunch of sports stories are going on or have been going on. Want to revisit the Super Bowl. We all made some predictions. The Rams and the Bengals battled it out on the field there. And as we know, Rams 23, Bengals 20. I had went for the Bengals. I was not really my team, but I was cheering on the Bengals. Roland was also cheering on the Bengals, but Brian and Clark, you guys were cheering on the Rams. And they won. The Rams are our Super Bowl champions. What do you guys think?
I don't know if I'd say I was cheering on the Rams. I was cheering for Matt Stafford to finally win something.
He suffered with the Lions along with the rest of us here in Michigan. And so it's good to see him win something and maybe prove that he really was carrying the Lions for so long. And he had some haters here, and I think they can't really talk anymore.
You know what I wanted to see? I wanted to see him like rip the rip the jersey off and expose a lion underneath, like just, you know. And
He had no way. No, he had no reason to do that. He doesn't owe the Lions anything anymore.
but it would have gone with the halftime show. It would have gone. Like, I mean, like, you know, the throwback in Detroit and Eminem, and I don't know. And Cooper Cup.
The halftime show was the best part in my mind, but
Was it really? I don't know.
That was a classic halftime show.
absolutely.
It was a good
great.
game, though. It was a good game, wasn't it?
You know what? It was
it was a fine game.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a good game for almost 3 quarters and 13 minutes.
Here we go.
Yeah. And then what happened?
The refs showed up. The refs, you know what? It was such a smooth sailing game. A couple of questionable, you know, little things here and there, but then the flag started. It was like the Rams are down. And all of a sudden the flags start coming out. And you just
So
knew
I
it.
got a question for you. I got a question for you, Guide.
Yeah.
There's instant replay. Did you not agree that there was a hold on the call where he made the call? Are you saying it wasn't a hold, or are you saying that he should have been making calls all throughout the game? I want to know, what's your take on it?
I guess my thing is always consistency, right? There were things going on throughout the game where you could have made some similar calls and they didn't. And then at the end of it, you make the call. You make the call when the game is on the line like that. And it just felt like I don't think, listen, here's the thing. I don't think the refs were in on it, but it just came across so bad right at the end of the game to see those flags. It's like, why now? Why not throughout the game? Why now?
I have a theory on that, and it's not only in football, it's in other things too. And it's sometimes a ref in a big game like that will let little things go. And so as fans are seeing little things go, and then when it gets down to the crunch, guys start doing something that's a little more obvious. And so then the fans get pissed off when they make the call. So I'm not on the refs on this one at all. I think they let the game go pretty good. There was one they missed, and that was the face mask on the, and everyone can see it on instant replay. The face mask that was against the Rams, or like the guy from the Rams would have caught it and he got face masked. They missed that, but they were letting a lot go. But when it comes down to the crunch and you hold a guy, and when you looked at the replay, he was holding him. He had his hand on the jersey and was holding him back. That's a call. You got to make it.
He did. But that happened earlier in the game in some plays too. So
yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Here's the thing for me. I don't have a football. I don't cheer any particular football team on. So I just really enjoyed the game, and I almost enjoyed the whole game except for the ending, I guess. And I think there's people out there who feel that way.
Coincidentally, a lot of them were pulling for Cincinnati. So can you say it's not partisan bias involved there? That you're looking at it and say, oh yeah, missing a call when it benefits one team is okay, but not when it's benefiting the other. Even if Cincinnati isn't your team, so to speak, they're the team you'd say you were rooting for in that game. So can you?
Well, they were the team that I said if Kansas City or the Bengals went, I wanted to see the Bengals win because they had never won anything, right? And I just thought, hey, cool, man, it would be nice to see. But I don't care. I mean, LA won, that's great. Stafford, the other story was Stafford. Like, yeah, hey, I'm glad Stafford finally, got something after all this time and the whole Detroit thing. So it's just an observation that. I always talk about the refs and consistency. It happened in the Super Bowl. It was probably one of the best Super Bowl games in terms of, hey, it went back and forth. It was close. It was entertaining. Nobody lost any articles of clothing during the halftime show. Like everything just kind of flowed except for those last couple of minutes. And to the casual fan who might have been watching, and there might be they might think, oh, that was a weird way to end the whole thing after that game. But anyways, is what it is. You guys called the Rams. The Rams took it. So
I have one lingering question, though. I want to know how long 50 Cent was hanging upside down for that halftime show before he started singing.
or something was holding him up. All right, so football and Clark. It always comes back to hockey. Let's go to hockey.
Always. Let's do hockey. Let's do that hockey.
On February 21st, the Leafs and the Habs played for the second time this season. Hard to believe we're in February and it's only the second meeting between them, I think. And the last place Montreal Canadiens handed it to the Stanley Cup projected playoff Toronto Maple Leafs. And I mean, the Leafs look bad. They look really, really, they looked as bad as I thought they were at the beginning of the season when things were kind of derailing. And the Habs looked almost as good as their playoff run. And I had to do like a double check. I was like, am I watching a tape here or something? But Cole Caulfield is totally unlocked with Martin St. Louis. And it was just like a game where I was thinking to myself, well, we know the Montreal Canadiens aren't going to do that every game here in and out, as you know, they're making trades and things like that. But the Leafs look bad. Mrazek looked bad. Muzzin, he got hurt, and I think he's in concussion protocol for a couple of games now to see what happens with him. But you know what was interesting? And I'm going to mention the refs. The Habs were winning. I get it. But the refs were like, there was one call. There was a too many men on the ice call that didn't happen. And it was so blatant. Like, you look at the wide angle view of it, and all the players have their hands up. Sheldon Keefe's like, oh my God, don't call that. Don't call that. He's kind of looking away. The refs are right there looking at it. The puck hits the guy. Austin Matthews in the middle of the ice. No call. No call. So, and Brian, you and I went back and forth on this, right? Because I said, hey, if it really matters, I guess, but if it's, you know, a call that gets missed because the ref doesn't, but he's staring at it. There's two of them. There's two refs, so we don't miss stuff like this. He's staring at it. Is there some favoritism with the Leafs?
Okay, before we hear the answer to that and continue to explore the reffing between the Habs and the Leafs, a quick word from one of our podcast friends.
Hi, I'm Richard Chase, introducing Chaser's Fresh Juice, a local business in Toronto. We've been in business for over 20 years, initially supporting our local Toronto area and now servicing all of Canada. Chaser provides fresh organic juices, ingredients including citrus zest, dehydrated garnishes, and fresh citrus peels to enhance any cocktail or recipe you can think of. We have successfully supplied restaurants, distilleries, craft breweries, and bakeries across the country. Reach out to orders@chasersjuice.com for any questions you may have. We are a customized fresh juice company, and I'm sure we can help you. Thank you.
All right, let's get back to the debate about the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, and the reffing and the suspicious calls.
If it really matters, I guess, but if it's, you know, a call that gets missed because the ref doesn't, but he's staring at it. There's two of them. There's two refs, so we don't miss stuff like this. He's staring at it. Is there some favoritism with the Leafs?
No, I don't think so. I think what you get is you get a ref that calls a whole game. And I've reffed, so I can speak from experience. You kind of ref the whole game, and you may have missed something else, so you may give a break. And we talked a few episodes back about the guy that got caught on the hot mic. What you have to look at is the ref's whole body of work for the whole game and not just the one call. So he might have missed something else, and he's evening it up. To you as the casual onlooker, or as the Habs fan seeing a missed call that you thought should have gone your team's way, you get all excited about it. Me, I don't, because I look at a ref calling the whole game, not just one play.
You're talking about it because you ref too, right? Like you got some.
Yeah, I have. So I'm speaking from a bit of experience too, and that's what you do as a ref. That's why I say it's a bad look for always getting on the refs, because if you know how a ref operates, you're looking at the whole game. You're not just looking at every single play. So if you're looking at consistency also means I missed one here, so I'm going to miss another one over there. That's consistent.
But not on purpose. Not on purpose. You can't, the whole evening things out is like old school. Like that. I can't say,
that's still school. The fact that the guy got caught in the mic and he got called out, that's why he got called out. They're still reffing like that, and they will into the future. I guarantee it, Guido. That's why I give you a hard time for always carping on the refs.
I'm never going to stop. I want consistency. Clark?
Well, you can dare to dream.
So I've come around on this. I have spent much of my blogging career harping on refs, and the best you can hope for is even. It's not the ref's job to make it fair, and they are going to miss stuff. The stuff that really bothers me is when they look at something and you can tell they see that and choose not to call,
right?
Or worse than that to me is when they call something that didn't happen.
Right.
That when you can go back to the replay and say, no, that didn't happen. How did you even think that happened? And that kind of stuff does come up. I mean, Wings fan, I can harp on phantom goalie interference calls against Tomas Holmstrom for 2 decades.
That happens to Brendan Gallagher every other game still, right?
And there are things, the refs get wrong. Harping on it doesn't change the game. It does even out mostly over the long term. Obviously, not all calls are created equal. So that's where I throw that mostly in there. To go back to Tomas Holmstrom, you say, they called goalie interference when they couldn't have, so then they gave a power play later that they shouldn't have.
Right.
Well, I want the automatic goal. I don't want the power play. That's not a true evener, but it's what they can do. And also, I don't believe that anybody was evening out Tomas Holmstrom goal interference calls because Dan Gallagher really believed that was happening.
No,
but that's my conspiracy theory.
And I don't think there was any evening out going on last night. I can't explain it, but when I'm watching the ref, there was a blatant high stick where I think Suzuki got clipped, and that was after the Habs had gotten a high stick call. That went uncalled, and then there was a 2 minute.
That's known as the Kerry Fraser call.
The Kerry Fraser. I don't know that.
That's known as the Kerry Fraser non-call.
Kerry Fraser's in another bucket for me right now because of other stuff. But anyways, it just kind of sometimes overshadows the other things that are going on in the game, right? And the Habs just had put on such a dominant performance, and there's so many good things happening for them in that game. The team's going to get dismantled. But I got to, the part of me that wonders about the Leafs is we're coming in on March. This is about the time when the Leafs do what the Leafs do, which is start to slide or start to show, holes in their game. And I mean, Campbell, didn't he get lit up by the St. Louis Blues? And then Mrazek gets lit up by the Montreal Canadiens, who haven't scored more than 2 goals, or I don't know what it is. It's their 3-game winning streak, but they haven't scored a lot of goals, right? So it makes you wonder about the Leafs. And we talked last time, Brian, about the trade. Are they going to make a move? I hear there's interest in Ben Sherratt from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Is that going to be more true now that Jake Muzzin might be a little bit hurt? So.
Yeah, the D going down, Muzzin going down adds some interesting complexity. Before that, I thought they would have gone after a tough guy, and I still contest that's what they're missing heading into the playoffs or heading into the final quarter of the season. They definitely need to have that a little bit more muscle. They got the finesse down. They had an off game last night. Montreal dominated them, to paraphrase you. But I
can't say that a lot this season. So I'm gonna say.
No, I know. I'm giving you your little victory here because my team will be playing in April and yours won't. So.
Hey, whether you're out in the first round or you don't make the playoffs,
I think they'll be playing in the second round.
You think so? Wow.
I do.
That's a bold prediction. It's almost as good as a prediction I'm hearing online that the Leafs are going to trade Jason Spezza for Ben Sherratt and for Brendan Gallagher and I don't know, a 6th-round pick or something. So I'd love to see the insider
Arizona.
Oh, we're gonna get to Arizona. Yeah, well, but we'll get to Arizona. But you know what? We should switch over. Olympics. We wanted to talk about the Olympics too. So the Olympics came and went. I think I watched less than 60 minutes of the Olympics. This Olympics. I couldn't get into it. I didn't care. I cared about our Canadian. I cared about the athletes. It's a weird thing. I cared about the athletes. I didn't care about the Olympics. The whole China thing. Eh?
I'll tell you what I got into the Olympics. I got into some of the sports, and as a sports fan, I put the politics aside and watch some of the sports because it's nice to see the world competition. But one thing I couldn't get into, the Canadian uniforms. That stuff from Lululemon, what was that? They looked like Michelin men in red. It was crazy.
I didn't even know. That's how much I watched. I didn't even know.
Bring back the old Roots reverse cap. I like that look back in the days when Ross Perot was smoking weed and winning snowboard competition.
I was watching in passing. We had the TV on, and I said here at home, I go, why does Canada have so many skiers on that half pipe? Like, what are you talking about? I said, they're all wearing the red beanie, like the red, and I said, what's going on with that? And it was just everybody got the same shirt to wear with the Olympic logo. I thought they were all from Canada. I'm like, wow, we got a lot of people doing that half pipe thing going on, right? And everybody's looking at me like that's just the Olympic sweater. I'm like, why can't they wear their own uniform? Like, where happened to the right? So
bring it back to hockey, though. Hey, what a surprise! Both Canada and the U.S. out, and the fact, obviously, fact that the NHL, the star players weren't there, but what an upset for the Slovakian team to beat the U.S. In that shootout, and then lo and behold, Canada goes out, right? So two teams that ordinarily you'd be predicting at least one of them to be in the final, hopefully both of them, because there's nothing better than a Canada-U.S. Olympic gold medal game. So we didn't get that in the men's, but we got it in the women's, and that was a great game. I think that was one of the highlights, the Canadian U.S. women's game. And like anything, thought it was over 3-1, and lo and behold, the U.S. is putting the pressure on, scores with 13 seconds left, and just that little glimmer of hope. But credit to the Canadian women, they pulled it off.
How about you?
The false hope goal there.
False hope.
That was a great game. That was the one bit of the Olympics that I watched, and it was. The U.S. women's team has. The U.S. and Canada are always at the top right there right now. We can debate about the rest of the world catching up, and there are a lot of people that want to debate that in really horrible ways, and I don't, so I'm not going to. And that's always the U.S. and Canada is always the matchup there, and this was going to be a tough year for the U.S. It was, it's a transition year anyway. They lost a lot of veterans, and it was disappointing to watch. As a fan of the U.S. team, it was disappointing to see the outcome, but not bad. It was a good game, and I hope that there were a lot of lessons there that management especially learned. I've got gripes about shortening the bench so early throughout the whole tournament. But hopefully we had some players there, some of the younger players that learned a bit, and hey, maybe next time things can be different for the U.S. Whether you guys want it or not.
I think it's going to be a great ongoing rivalry. That's one of the best rivalries going right now, I think.
Yeah, I just absolutely wonder, if the rest of the world's getting tired of it, though. Like,
I'll tell you where the rest of the world is catching up, and that's in curling. Canada usually comes through in curling, and we were texting back and forth during the mixed doubles, which is kind of like the beer pong of curling. Throw your rock and go chase it down the rink by yourself. But Italy wins the gold medal in curling. Now, who would have ever predicted that? That would have been one of those 10,000 to 1 bets that you would have got. that was phenomenal for Italy to pull it off. The girl that was part of that duo was just couldn't miss a shot the whole tournament. And then luckily the Canadian men pulled out a bronze so that we didn't, it wasn't a total skunking, but the Canadian women didn't even make it to the semifinals. So not a very good showing for curling. And Clark, I'm not sure how big curling. Well, the big curling's pretty big in the States. The men's curling guy.
It's
he's doing great.
It's big in Minnesota in particular, and yeah, it's there's been. I mean, you can see a lot more interest in it. In the last decade or so. So hey, I mean, we'll see. I mean, if anything comes from that as far as the future there.
Well, see, the two of you got way more results than I did. I think I picked up more on the political side of it, with the doping thing with the Russian and figure skating there and just the way that the committee kind of handled that scenario and in terms of, well, if she wins, there's not going to be a medal presentation. And I was just scratching my head thinking, well, how about the other two people that might be on the podium with them? Why don't they get the medal present? Why are we catering to the ROC? Why is the ROC even there? Right? Like, what are they doing at these Olympics, given that everything else that's going on? Sure, come on, let's have it in China. And yeah, Russia, come on and show us all of your talent and skill. Guys, I couldn't get it behind it. I feel bad. I was happy that the Canadian athletes that won, and all of the athletes that won. I didn't watch the hockey game. I didn't watch any of the hockey games. I think I saw like 3 minutes of the hockey games. I swear every time that I walked by and someone had the TV on here that was watching the Olympics, that half pipe thing was on. And the jumps all looked the same to me over and over and over. I was like watching it on replay or something. And I hated the half pipe. I think that's what it was, the half pipe ski and snowboarding thing. So I just couldn't get into it. I want to know, I know that there's some folks online, some of the reputable reporters online have been asking, I wonder what the ratings are like. I wonder how low the ratings are for this Olympics, given that everything that was going on. But you know what? Speaking of ratings, here's an interesting thing. Always back to hockey. Here's an interesting thing. The Coyotes are going to play in front of 5,000 fans. Maybe. They'll have a 5,000 capacity where 5,000 fans could fit. We don't know if they will fit or go, but Gary Bettman, who was the center of one of my biggest jerks in sports and one of our For Fans Talk Sports episodes, approved a 5,000 seat NHL, National Hockey League arena for the Coyotes to move into for possibly 3 seasons. Possibly, guys. Is it a bad dream? How is this? We have facilities. Sorry, Clark. We have facilities in Ontario at the OHL level that would exceed it. And thanks for the visual. That would exceed it and probably put on a better show. Why not move them? Or why not move them to Quebec, where they have an NHL ready arena? Clark.
All right, I got words here. Why not move them? And there's a handful of things to look at for that. When the Thrashers relocated to Winnipeg, Gary Bettman, number one villain, went up there and basically said, you'd better sell out or the team won't be able to make it. And when you say won't be able to make it to a fan base that had already lost a team in a country where there have already been a couple of teams lost and the threat of it happening again is ever present, that sounds a lot like we're waiting to take your team from you. And to say that while announcing the relocation, which was a point of celebration for Winnipeg Jets fans, Canada, was a jerk move to go with your top jerks in sports. But it was also a lie. And that's where we get caught up in that lie, because franchises don't move if the owner doesn't want them to move. The original Jets moved because their owners couldn't handle losing money anymore and sold to people who wanted to move them. Same for the Nordiques. The Whalers moved because Peter Carmanos wanted to move them, whether or not he was actually losing in Hartford, which is a whole other thing. But in True North, the Jets now have owners that can ride out financial issues, and they have deeper pockets. They can theoretically not have to be so quick to sell to someone intent on moving the team. So that threat was never based in reality. The current situation in Winnipeg is similar to the situation in Arizona. Alex Murillo does not want to relocate the Coyotes. Under Arizona law, and I've talked about this before, by virtue of owning the Coyotes, he gets to own a presumably profitable sports book, which puts him in a position where he can run the Coyotes as a loss leader. Would he prefer to make money on both the Coyotes and his sports book? Probably, but he's not going to throw away the sportsbook profits just because the hockey team that enables those sportsbook profits has to play in a glorified community rink. So, but that looks bad. Like you said, they're playing in an arena that's smaller than OHL arenas, or they will be. So why doesn't the NHL step in and do something about it? Why doesn't Gary Bettman say no to this? And really, and again, we're back to villain Gary Bettman. And I've said repeatedly, Bettman is the mouthpiece for the rest of the owners. The only thing the league, the owners, Bettman, whatever, can do is force Murillo to sell the team. They can't force him to keep the team but relocate them to Quebec. They can't force him to do anything with them other than sell to somebody who would take them to Quebec, take them to Houston, take them wherever, take them back to Atlanta. No. Well, okay. I shouldn't have said back there, because somebody is going to say, "Oh, they were never there in the first."
Right,
No, that's
right.
not what I meant.
No, but we get what you
back
mean.
in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the league step in and force him to sell. And take a look at the history of that across the big leagues. You had the NBA forcing Donald Sterling to sell the Clippers in 2014 due to his racist tirades. You had Frank McCourt of the Dodgers, who was he really forced out, or did he run out of money and the MLB had to step in to stop him from ruining the team? So was that really forced to sell, or did the sale just happen because he ran out of money? Same kind of thing with Marge Schott and the Cincinnati Reds, where she was suspended by baseball when she sold the team. But was she really forced to sell the team? Not really. So when you're talking about forcing an owner to sell their team, that doesn't happen. It happened with racist tirades from Donald Sterling, and before that, you have to go back to like World War II, when the economics were completely different, and it might as well be ancient history in these cases. So to be forced to sell, you have to do something so egregious that the other owners agree action has to be taken. And like it or not, sharing an arena with a college team isn't going to make that cut. If that makes the cut, if the NHL forces Murillo to sell for this, then Rocky Wirtz has to be looking over his shoulder wondering if the Kyle Beach cover-up is enough for him to be forced out. And Chris Ilitch has to be looking over his shoulder and wondering whether allowing his arena to be used to detain protesters is a reason to be forced to sell it. And Jeff Molson has to look and say whether drafting a convicted sex offender is enough. And all of these guys have stuff.
We've brought these topics up over and over and over. And obviously, our ethic and moral line is much higher than that of the NHL owners and its leader, Gary Bettman. And I believe that there's fans out there that have that same line, where we kind of sit back and go, I love the game, but man, I don't love what's going on here. I don't love all these other ideologies and themes and favors that are going on to sustain these owners and the teams and the sport. I think you nailed it, Clark. I think you nailed it on all points. I have nothing. Like I agree with almost everything you just said. Like, right?
Except for the part where I said that Batman wasn't really the villain.
Well, you know what? He is. I get it. And I've said before, you know what? It flows upwards because the owners kind of have to support it. But he's got a voice. And he could listen. This is a guy who wanted to grow the game in the United States of America, who has grown the game in the United States of America, and he had a plan to do that.
I'm going to disagree with you on every point there.
That he didn't grow the game?
Southern expansion for the NHL started before Bettman was named commissioner.
Right. But
so that is not his plan. And also, it's not about growing the game. It's about getting the bigger TV deal.
Right. So you beat me to it. I was going to say
whether or not more people start playing the game because of that. And the NHL does not care. They will make a token effort, sure, but they don't care. They care about their profits.
I was going to say, you beat me to he got the TV deals. And when I say grow the game, he got the TV deals. He made it more commonplace. He did make it more commonplace. I mean, we have the Seattle Kraken are playing hockey. Seattle, I never would think that Seattle would have a team and Quebec doesn't, right? Or anyways, but I think he did nail it. I still think he's still the head. He still has some accountability as the lead. Brian, we got about a minute. What do you have a take on this?
I with respect to the Bettman thing, I think he's I won't say controlled by his owners, but he answers to the owners. That's who gives him the direction, right? So I agree with Clark. You can't pin it on him. He's doing what the rest of the owners want. And I think you made some good points, Clark, about, if you make an example or you do something with one, then the dominoes start to fall. How can you force one to move and then not look at another, right? So I think this is just going to play out, and you'll be seeing the Montreal Canadiens and the Leafs playing in what would be the equivalent of visiting the Peterborough Petes or the Kitchener Rangers or in an OHL size arena with OHL size fan base.
I can't wait. I'm gonna go get a $17 NHL ticket to watch the Arizona Coyotes play against the Montreal Canadiens next season. It's gonna cost me $600 to fly there, but I'll be right up and close.
Your hot dog will be cheap.
I don't know, guys. I have a hard time. Gary Bettman. I have a hard time. NHL, Arizona. What a disaster. That's going to be a wrap, guys. We had a few things we wanted to talk about. We're going to be back. We're going to do this a little bit more frequently. For folks who are listening in, you're going to catch some of this on the Four Fans Talk Sports on the Go On Guido podcast. And then we're going to have some of these episodes that are just going to be It's Not the Ref on a little bit more frequent interim sort of basis. Whenever some topics come up that we message each other and say, hey, let's talk about it. We thought we would do that. So hopefully everybody's going to enjoy that. And it is the ref, right, Brian?
Never the ref.
It's not the ref. All right. That's Brian. That's Clark. This is Guido. Thanks for tuning in, folks. All right. So we're coming to the end of the podcast. And I always try to leave you with some music. And we're going to go back to the Co-Conspirators. We've got Catherine, we've got Will, and we're going to hear You Shone So Bright. Now, remember, you can hear these on thepathradio.com on Monday, which is the mini concert Monday, 3 songs in a row from some of your favorite artists. You can also hear the Co-Conspirators on Sundays on thepathradio.com, and that's after 1 p.m. on Sundays. And of course, we're going to have in the podcast notes all the contact information and links for the Co-Conspirators so that you can go and stream and purchase whatever songs you would like to have with you on your own personal devices on a continuous basis. So here we go. This is the Co-Conspirators, Catherine and Will, with You Shone So Bright.
I'll keep your door open, posters on your wall. when you come say hello. Don't worry if it's late and we're sleeping, I will know. You shone so bright in your light, you took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you are. Forgive me, my little pride, thinking that you were mine. In a world full of dark and shadow, you chose to shine. You can bet everything you have will be thinking of you. Sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a tear, but always you shone so bright in your light. You took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you are.
The saddest thing that I will hear is a silence where your voice should be. And one thing that I know I fear, no more you. You here with me.
You shone so bright in your light. You took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you shone so bright in your light. You took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you shone so bright in your light. You took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you shone so bright in your light. You took away all the dark. If you're out there tonight, feeling sad and alone, love will find you wherever you are.
Again, thank you, Will. Thank you, Catherine. Those are the Co-Conspirators. You shone so bright, and so did you, our fans on the Go On With Guido podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to having you back come April. Stay safe and be kind to each other, folks. Take care.